In the last installment of our axle snap and 427-inch small block build, we finished up the bottom end. That included the thumper hydraulic roller from Comp Cams, which should sound amazing. And now it's time to move on to the cylinder heads and the rest of the valve train. I'm really excited about these cylinder heads that we got from Brodix. They're Dragon Slayers, and they should be exactly what we need for this engine build. So I guess it's time to get to work and quit talking. We've heard great things about Brodix's cylinder heads from other engine builders and thought these Dragon Slayers would be a perfect fit for this high performance build. These 23-degree aluminum heads offer great value for the price. The combustion chambers are CNC cut and look fantastic, and the valve seats arrive with a high-flowing multi-angle performance cut. A well-designed 225cc intake port combined with the larger valves, 2080 for the intakes and inch 600 for the exhausts, mean these heads will flow over 300 CFM at 600 valve lift. Brodix also sent the stainless steel valves we'll be using. Oh, and to keep the compression ratio manageable, we chose the larger 68cc combustion chamber. We took these heads to our friends at KT Engine Development for assembly, and so that cylinder head specialist Kevin Troutman could give them the once-over. He checked all the clearances and said the work that Brodix did on these heads spec'd out right on the nose. These are definitely some high-quality heads, and with a street price of just over $1,100 for a pair, a heck of a deal in our opinion. Comp Cams helped us spec out the best springs to match up with the camshaft and the rest of the valve train. We're using Comp's Beehive valve springs, part number 26918. With a spring rate of 372 pounds per inch, we're looking at 140 pounds of pressure at the installed height and around 347 over the nose. We're using gaskets from Mr. Gasket throughout this build, and to seal the combustion chambers, Mr. Gasket's multi-layered steel head gaskets are a no-brainer. Less expensive composite gaskets are still useful in the right situations, but for a build using dissimilar metals, like with this iron block and aluminum heads, an MLS gasket is much better at keeping everything sealed tight, even when the heated metals are expanding at different rates. The MLS head gaskets are also an excellent choice if you plan to add a power adder like nitrous or a supercharger, which, we're not saying what our future plans are for this engine, but the internals are built to handle it. And here's a very cool idea the people at ARP turned us on to. This is their 12-point head bolt kit for small block Chevys. The bolts that are exposed are chrome plated to look good and clean up easy, but the bolts that are hidden underneath the valve covers won't be seen, so they are protected with black zinc oxide. It's a great look without wasting money by hiding chrome underneath valve covers. ARP also includes in their bolt kits their Ultra Torque Lube, which provides more consistent torque readings than practically any other lubricant. It goes on the underside of the head of the bolt as well as the washer. And since the Dart SHP block we're using has blind head bolt holes that aren't open to the water jackets like a stock block, you don't have to worry about using thread sealer, so you can use the Ultra Torque on those threads also. After all the head bolts are in place, they are torqued in 3 steps to a final value of 70 foot-pounds. You do need to be aware that the improved intake ports for these Brodix heads cause the rocker stud holes to open into the ports. This isn't a big deal, just make sure to use thread sealer on the rocker studs to properly seal the ports. The lifters chosen for this build are Comp Cam's hydraulic rollers. These link bar rollers can handle our aggressive cam profile no problem and utilize a longer body to make sure the link bars don't contact the block even when using an aftermarket block with taller lifter bars, which as you can see is necessary here. To make sure everything is properly lubricated, the lifters are soaked in motor oil overnight before installation in the lifter valley. Finally, everything is in place to check for proper pushrod length. The valve springs for the first cylinder are popped off and replaced with a pair of lightweight checking springs because they won't have the pressure to collapse the lifter's valve body. After running a few checks with an adjustable pushrod, we found the right length and it measured out to 7 inches 400 thousandths. For both the intake and exhaust. That's pretty short because of the extra tall lifters, but it's a bonus because it will help improve rigidity. And while the checking springs are in place, we also checked the piston to valve clearance, which turned out to be more than enough at over 200 thousandths at the closest point. Even if the engine gets into an extended high RPM situation and the hydraulic lifters pump all the way up, there should still be plenty of clearance. We went with a set of Comp's high-tech 5/16 inch one-piece hardened push rods for the job. After washing them off, a little assembly lube goes in between the push rod and the lifter cup on one end, and a thicker high pressure lube goes between the push rod and the rocker on the other end, and we're good to go. The rocker arms are another trick piece. These are Comp's 1.6:1 ratio Ultra Pro Magnum steel rockers, which are the next evolution on Comp's long-standing and popular Pro Magnums. The Ultra Pros utilize a strutted design forged from chromoly steel for great rigidity with practically no weight gain versus softer aluminum rockers. They're also finished with a black oxide coating that should help shed oil. Combined with the 348 thousandths lobe lift, that gives a total intake valve lift of 559 thousandths of an inch. Exhaust lift is 542 thousandths. Installing the rocker arms on a hydraulic valve train is pretty simple. Make sure the trunnion is turned so that the machine flat mating surface for the poly lock faces up, and then slowly tighten the lock while spinning the push rod until you feel the push rod cup on the end of the rocker come down on the push rod and take up all the slack. Comp's instructions say to tighten down on the adjuster nut an additional full turn to depress the lifter's plunger before tightening the poly lock to lock everything down. We did that, but a full turn might be a bit too much for this build, and we may back off on it to just a half turn during dyno testing. Once all the rockers are installed, the valve train is finished. The intake manifold is YN's Speed Warrior dual plane intake. It's a good combination for this engine package. The dual plane configuration will help promote low end torque and at least reasonable street manners given this engine's displacement. Meanwhile, the raised plenum design should also help the intake breathe well like a single plane and keeps an insulating air gap between the engine and the intake runners. YN says the Speed Warrior works best from 1500 to 6700 RPM, which should be right in this engine's wheelhouse. If the intake looks a little bit unusual, that's because I already had a friend in the paint and body business shoot it with a couple coats of clear coat. The fabricated valve covers we picked up from my local speed shop, and the gaskets and breathers are all from Mr. Gasket. We'll install a PCV valve on one side after the engine comes back off the dyno. For the ignition, we went with a comprehensive set from Pertronic, including the distributor, coil, and a set of 8mm plug wires, plus a set of spark plugs from Autolite. Pertronic's flamethrower is a billet distributor with quality components like solid brass terminals and a high quality gear that's ground to size with high precision. It's also outfitted with Pertronic's Igniter 3 electronics, which we're told makes adjustments for dwell throughout the RPM range to maintain a high strength spark throughout. The Igniter 3 module also has a useful and easy to adjust RPM limiter, which we plan to demonstrate in detail in another video. The distributor will have to come out again before we get on the dyno, but we'll stab it in for now so that we can get the wires in place. These are Pertronic's MagX2 8mm performance wires. They have a low ohm resistance and have an oil and heat resistant silicone jacket. We also like that Pertronics marks the distributor end of each wire to make installation just a little bit easier. Finally, the cherry on top of this horsepower cake is one of Holley's new Ultra Double Pumper 4-barrel carbs. Holley has upgraded its Ultra carbs with a lot of high-end features now standard. This 750 CFM carb we're using features billet metering blocks and a billet base plate, all aluminum construction making the Ultra over 5 pounds lighter than the other carbs, glass fuel level sight windows, a no-hassle electric choke, and idle adjustments on all 4 corners, which will be very helpful given that we're using a dual plane intake. Plus, the hard anodizing, Holley calls it hardcore gray, just looks wicked. And that's about it for this installment of our 427-inch small block Chevy build-up. There's still a few more odds and ends to wrap up, but the next time you see us, we hope to be on the dyno making some noise. Make sure to check back soon.